Hello, Giovanni. Welcome to today's show. So nice to have you here.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's such a pleasure. I absolutely loved your book, Mindful Self-Discipline, that I consider to be the ultimate self-discipline manual. So already I highly recommend it to all the listeners, and we haven't yet begun. So before we start with all the questions, how would you introduce the concept of mindful self-discipline to maybe the listeners who aren't yet familiar with it?
Sure. So first talking about self-discipline, this is something that some people already know it's extremely important. And if you ask top performers in any field, I would bet that they would say that self-discipline, or a variation of this word, they may call it determination or commitment or perseverance or work ethic. There are many different facets of self-discipline, but I would bet that all of them would say that this was one of the most important factors of their success. And yet for some people, when they hear the word self-discipline, they kind of cringe. There is a sense that it's something painful, something that you don't want to do. So I would like to start clarifying that self-discipline is not self-punishment, it is self-respect. It is you keeping your commitments to yourself. It is you knowing what are the most important things in your life, your values, your long-term goals and aspirations, and living life day by day in a way that is aligned with that, in a way that your day-to-day life, your actions are in harmony with your goals. And when you live life like this, then you go to bed feeling satisfied how you spend your day, knowing that every day you're taking steps forward towards your vision. And so that's really what self-discipline is about. It's about empowering you to be your best self, to live your best life. Now, mindful self-discipline, that is a term I coined. It's my approach to this topic, because self-discipline has always been extremely important for me, and something that I've an important tool that I've helped my clients with. But I noticed that a lot of what's written about self-discipline out there, it's a very military approach. It's a kind of very martial approach to the topic. And that works. That works for some people. That works for me in some cases as well. But it's not so approachable for most people. And it's not so long-term. It can often feel that you're pushing a boulder uphill, while self-discipline should feel like rolling a boulder downhill. And when you start with awareness, and alignment with your vision, then self-discipline and willpower, it feels more natural. It's more effortless. It's easier to practice. So that's the idea of mindful self-discipline. It is self-discipline that emphasizes awareness. And that's where the tools of meditation and mindfulness and self-reflection with journaling, etc., that all comes in.
It also works a lot better, like you were saying, when we have this forceful approach, we're pushing the boulder uphill. It's so much harder. I know that if I contrast to time in my life where I was trying to build an exercise routine out of frustration that I was struggling to build it, and every time falling off hill and starting again, versus awareness, acceptance, compassion, and just wanting to do it, it works a lot better. You also speak about this extrinsic versus intrinsic reward system. Maybe you could say a few words on this, and how basically being intrinsically motivated is so much more useful and works so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you spend any time on the blogs and the podcasts, there's a lot of talk about extrinsic form of motivation, that when you do something that is important for you, you go and reward yourself. You give yourself a good experience. And the problem with that is that you're always depending on that external thing to motivating you to do something that is good for you. It's like, instead of learning, if you have health goals and you want to replace burgers with salad, instead of learning how to love the salad, you are putting in a lot of mayonnaise on top. And that's the way you're eating salad. And hey, you can say that at least you're eating salad, so it's good. But much better is to learn how to enjoy salad for its own taste, for its own sake. And if you do that, then you won't have to exercise forceful willpower anymore. It's like a person who loves going to the gym. He doesn't need to exercise much willpower about going to the gym. He just enjoys feeling that sense of muscle burn and the sweat and how good he feels afterward. He has found an intrinsic motivation. That is, he enjoys the feeling of it during it or after it. And he also enjoys because that's aligned with who he is. He is a person who takes care of his body, so he enjoys doing that. As much as possible, we want to first develop clarity about our vision, our long-term aspiration, and our values. And once we know that, then we choose a path, we choose a journey or a method that is aligned with our vision. Then we are able to do those actions in a way that is less forceful, less effortful, because it's who we are, like we are doing this, like we're building this business, or we are writing this book, or I am in this journey of meditation, or whatever it is. And so yes, there's going to be effort, there's going to be some pain involved, but it's related to the person I want to be. And so there's a sense of wanting to do that activity for its own sake. And when you do that, then you're not going to need hacks of rewarding yourself with a bar of chocolate once you have done this for 7 days. You won't need that, because doing the activity itself is its own reward. And that's important, because in most journeys, there's like 99 days of effort and the result is on the 100th day. So if you're going to suffer those 99 days and you're going to go through it out of sheer willpower just to enjoy the result at the end, what if the result doesn't come? Now compare that with the idea of mindful self-discipline, that you learn to enjoy those 99 days. You learn to enjoy the sweat. You learn to enjoy the effort, because it's stretching you, it's strengthening you, it's making you a better person, a more resourceful person, and you enjoy the value of that for its own sake. So if you achieve the result or not at the end, it's almost secondary. Like the result is just a reason for you to go through the journey. Because once you achieve that goal, you know what, you will be happy for a while, and then you want to replace it with another goal. But at least you have enjoyed the journey. So that's what's different about this approach.
You refer to this effort as tapas, which aren't the Spanish snacks, but rather that mental and psychological heat. How can we use this concept of tapas to benefit our self-discipline?
Mm-hmm. So the idea is that whenever there is friction, friction creates heat. It's like that in physics, and it's like that in our internal world. If you want to avoid this psychological heat, this effort, then you would have to live a life that is so boring, so kind of mediocre, that you're never stretching yourself. You're just choosing comfort every single time. And unfortunately, that's how many people are living this day, that they are, whenever possible, they're just choosing comfort. And comfort is becoming so easy, so easily accessible. It's so easy to have a pleasant time with our phones with zero effort. It's always in our pocket, that this little by little is killing our motivation. Because our brain is like, why should I put in a lot of effort to go through a difficult journey and perhaps have a huge result at the end, but perhaps have nothing, while I can just open my phone, scroll through this app and read these things and have a fun time, right? It doesn't make so much sense for the brain, because the brain wants to save energy. It wants to save energy because the number one priority of our brain, evolutionarily speaking, is to survive. And to survive, you need to save energy, because in the past, you don't know when you're going to have food again. So save energy, survive. Laziness and procrastination was rewarded in the past, and our brain is still there. But in our present life, when we don't want to just survive, when survival is almost a given, like we have a fridge, we have food, we're going to have food tomorrow, we want to thrive in our life, then what helped us then now becomes an obstacle. And that's why it's the next step in human evolution, in our personal evolution, is to learn how to master these impulses, this attachment to instant gratification and to comfort, and instead favor those things that they take longer to come, but they bring a greater sense of fulfillment when they do.
Yes, I think it's so interesting to see that something that served us historically or biologically speaking is now hindering our progress to thrive, and being aware of this. What have you found to be one of the most tangible obstacles to self-discipline, and how can we overcome it?
There are, in the book, I talk about 7 different obstacles, things like procrastination, distractions, excuses, fears. I would say that perhaps the first obstacle is not having a clear vision of who you want to be, of the life you want to, where you want to be in life 10 years from now. Like, what are the most important things? The things that if you tick, you're going to be, you really feel proud. We really feel like you have expressed your potential in this life. You've done what you've come here to do. Like, what are those things for you? Once we have clarity about that, then everything else fades in importance, because like this is like, it's the most important thing. And we start with that. And that's why in the book, I start with the aspiration pillar, because having this type of clarity gives us the strength, the motivation, if you will, to then overcome the other obstacles. But other than this kind of lack of clarity and vision and motivation, I would say that the most common enemies of self-discipline are distractions and procrastination.
Yes. And how would you suggest? I mean, you explain this in depth in your book. So for those of you who want to go deeper, please read the book. But for someone who's maybe just listening to this podcast and thinks, oh, yes, I struggle with this, what would you recommend? What would be your number one tip, maybe for procrastination or distractions?
Okay. Yeah. So there are different tools that I suggest in the book for these two obstacles. Starting with distractions, a lot of it is about raising awareness of what it is doing for you. That when you 50 times a day you go and go for an instant gratification on your phone or on the internet, you're not only, let's say that each of these times only lasts 1 minute. You're not only wasting 50 minutes. You are training yourself to be in a distracted state. You are training yourself to pursue satisfaction, to pursue happiness through things that are short bursts of dopamine. And when you're training to do that every day, multiple times a day, then it becomes really hard to motivate yourself to go after the long term. Right. So I go, I think 10 or 20 pages in the book, just really painting the whole picture to create full awareness about this. So that's important. But in terms of techniques, one of the things I talk about is a monk week. And a monk week is a kind of a junk dopamine detox, where for a week in your life, you cut all sources of distraction completely, and you just do the things that are related to your aspiration. You sleep well, you eat well, yes. You keep connected with people who are important in your life, yes. But all of the other time you are dedicated to your important work, to the important things you want to do. You do meditation, you exercise, you do all of that, but zero distractions, zero procrastination. You cut all of that out for a week. And when you come back in a very gradual and mindful way to those other activities. And you will notice that your relationship with your phone and with the internet and with the other sources of distraction in your life has changed. And so then you bring them back, if needed, in a way that is very mindful, in a way that is very aware. So that is one of the methods that I talk about in overcoming distraction. And one way to think about this is like to actually take a week off and do the monk week. Another way of thinking about this is to have a monk hour in your day. Maybe it's the first hour or two of your day every morning where you're actually offline, phone in airplane mode, you're not online, you cannot be interrupted. And you go and do the most important habits or activities that you need to do that are connected to your aspiration. If you're writing a book, then that perhaps is 2 hours that you're just writing offline. Or perhaps that's going to include some meditation, some physical exercise, and working on a side business. But it's a time of your day that it's sacred, that you're like a monk, you have no distractions, you have no other desires, there are no temptations, you're just doing those things that are most important for you. So you're exercising that muscle of focus rather than the monkey mind, as you say in meditation, that goes into distractions. So yes, that's what I would say about distractions. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say that the part on distractions and how it trains our mind to default to something that's easier, that really struck me. I remember when I read that passage thinking, okay, I work a lot on focus and this is one of my main topics. So I'm pretty good at handling distractions, but no one's perfect. And I remember thinking, no, I don't want to train my mind to think that that's an option. And I think this is super important because people can fool themselves in thinking, oh, it's just 1 minute, or maybe they have the restraint bias toward these things and think it'll only take a couple of seconds. But it's training our minds that each time they're bored or frustrated to default to this. I'd like to go a bit on a tangent. One of the key threads throughout your book is balance, which I love. And you talk about meditation being empowered peace. So you love what you get, which is the acceptance, and you get what you love, which is the empowerment. And I never seen meditation in that light. So I'd love you to elaborate a bit on this.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad that you bring this topic. Many people who interview me, they have read maybe a chapter or two of the book. So it's great to speak to someone who has actually read the whole book and thinking about it. But yeah, there's this theme in the meditation space out there. The meditation is all about kind of relaxation and not being stressed and releasing anxiety and accepting the reality of the present moment so that you don't suffer. And for me, that never really struck a chord for me. For me, that's only like half of the story. And I say that this is meditation as peace, as accepting what you get, accepting what comes in your life. Now, the other half for me is meditation as power. And meditation gives you power over yourself, over your impulses, over your mind. And that means your ability to focus on something. That is a form of power, right? So that helps you get what you want, not only want what you get. So for me, meditation is these two things. So I call it empowered peace. It's not the peace of the graveyard that you're just kind of in a hippie-like state. You're happy with whatever happens, no problems. I don't think that's what. I mean, at least the people that I serve, the people that I connect with, they are not. That's not where they are. And I think people in this podcast also, they are interested in, like, they have goals. There's something that they want to change in themselves or in their life. There is an intention, a desire, a dream that they want to manifest. And so meditation empowers you not only to accept and release suffering, but also to really focus on the important things, to get clarity about the important things. And in the chapter in the book where I talk about meditation, I go and talk about the different styles or forms of meditation and how some of them are more focused on the acceptance bit, while others are more focused on the concentration and the motivation part.
Yes, the different types was also interesting for me because I tend to just focus on counting my breath, but then I saw, oh, that's focused meditation. Then sometimes I observe emotions or space around me or noises, and then I'm like, oh, that's observation. I hadn't even realized there were different types. I really love this idea of empowered peace because I do feel that sometimes meditation has this reputation of it can help you to be calm and slow down and peaceful. I don't know why more people don't want that, but they forget that it also trains your focus and your power and your concentration. That's why I'm always surprised when I meet people that are C-suite or founders or business owners, and they're not even interested in cultivating a meditation practice because it is such a superpower. If they struggle to implement it, it's one thing, but not even interested or knowledgeable about it, I would think, wow, you're missing out because this would help you a lot. I love this. I love this.
Yeah, it's a misconception. I have also talked with people who say like, oh, I don't need to meditate. I'm already calm by nature. I said, that's not the point. It's, but it is a misconception that meditation is all about that. It's how it has been marketed in the West. But if you see many people who are extremely successful, like the investor Ray Dalio, he credits its meditation to being like the most important thing or one of the most important things. I don't remember exact wording for his success. And he is like one of the world's top investors, top hedge fund managers. So, meditation, this ability to focus on one thing despite everything else. We are living in a world of distractions. We're living in a world that there is a lot of noise of information. And there's the saying, I forgot who said it, that information consumes the attention of its recipients. So the more information there is coming in your life, the less attention, the less focus you're going to have. And attention is extremely important. It's like this, it's this lenses of awareness that whatever it focuses on, it enlightens that part, and everything else doesn't exist for a moment, and that part exists and grows strong. So if you can learn how to control your attention, then you get control of your life, because whatever you pay attention to will grow, will become strong. And whatever you turn your attention away from, that thing will eventually disappear. So for instance, many people struggle with negative self-talk. If you stop paying attention to those negative thoughts, eventually they will die out, because attention is the food It's the food for thought. If you're not feeding them, eventually they will die out. And if instead you are paying attention to thoughts that are more empowering, then that will become strong. That will color the way you see life and the way you experience things. So meditation is extremely important for learning how to manage our attention, which is kind of like the core currency of our life.
Yes, and that's why I'm so passionate about attention and focus. And I also realized throughout reading your book that in many ways it was as if I was passionate about self-discipline, because as you explain, focus is intention, awareness, but also taking action, which is the discipline part. So as I was reading, I thought, hey, focus, self-discipline, they're sort of the same, because you need the discipline and the willpower to actually follow through with the focus. So many ways they're very, very similar and tied together. You also call this the law of attention. And I was wondering if you could maybe give some examples in your own life of the results you got from this law of attention.
Yeah, so the law of attention is this that I just mentioned, that whatever you put your attention on, that thing will come into being, that thing will grow. And what you remove your attention from, it will kind of disappear. So if we all have different areas of life, in the book I talk about 8 of them. And if there's a particular area of your life that things are not going well, let's say your finances, I would bet that there's a high chance that you're not putting attention in that area of your life. And if suddenly you start putting attention in that area of your life, you will see what needs to be tweaked. You will see what needs to be improved. And then you will take action, you will take proper action, and that thing starts to flourish. And some areas of our life are such that we can just do this for a while and then leave it be, and then it continues on its own. But in general, as you said, balance is one of the themes of mindful self-discipline, that we all have different aspects of our life and all of them need to be paid attention to. If you stop paying attention to your relationship will crumble, right? There will not be any joy, and eventually may just kind of break down. If you're not paying attention to your mental health, well, your mental health will suffer. If you're not paying attention to your business will suffer. So whatever we pay attention to comes into being. Whatever we remove our attention from, that thing will disappear.
Yes, it's so interesting how sometimes we forget about this. And again, that's why having that mental space and awareness to actually review our goals and aspirations and keep these areas in mind can help us to avoid neglecting one of the areas. I also think that one of the key takeaways I had from reading about the obstacles on goals was this false hope syndrome that I clearly highly identified with. I was curious about if you could contrast the false hope syndrome with the Dunning Kruger effect, because in my point of view, they seem quite similar.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they are similar. They are different ways of looking at the same phenomenon. Basically, it's the idea that the false hope syndrome is when you believe that the path is going to be shorter than it's actually going to be. You think that it's going to be easy, that you won't meet many obstacles, that your goal will be achieved without much trouble. And what happens is when this is your expectation, when you come into a journey, then you are allocating this amount of willpower for it. Right? You think it's going to be easy. And when you go and life pulls the rug under your feet and you see that, oh, this is actually going to take much longer than I expected and much more effort than I expected, then you came in ready to invest this much, but it's actually going to take this much. And at that point, many people kind of get disappointed and give up the idea. So it is better to avoid the negative effect of both of these phenomena, the false hope syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger effect, is to expect that things may take longer than you imagine. Expect things may be harder than you imagine. And if you do that, you are allocating more willpower for that activity. So I'll give an example in my own life. About 2 years ago, when my daughter was born, the shift from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. was mine. So I had to wake up at 4 a.m. And at that time, I was waking up at 5:30. 4 a.m. was an hour and a half earlier, and it was difficult. I was putting the alarm, and I would just I don't know what happened. I wake up and it's 5:30. Like, what happened to the alarm? Probably unconsciously, I just snoozed it. So I said, okay, I'm going to put the alarm away from my bed. right? So I would wake up, I have to move to the alarm to turn it off. And then I would say to in my own mind, like, okay, I'm just close my eyes for 1 minute and then I'll be ready. And poof, gone for an hour. So eventually I said, okay, this is a real challenge. Like I need to allocate more willpower for this. It's not going to be as easy as I expected. So what I did is every night when I'm going to bed, I would tell myself, tomorrow morning, the first 10 minutes will feel like hell. Right? So I would tell myself that to allocate enough willpower. Because what happened is at that time when I was waking up at 4 a.m., it would take me 1 or 2 minutes to just like really open my eyes. Like it was very difficult. I was just ready to be in deep sleep at the time. So the moment that I start saying like, you know what, it's going to be hell the first 10 minutes, be ready for it. Then things start shifting for me. I was able to wake up at 10 because I was expecting to need to use a lot of effort to make that happen. And it was never hell. That's the funny thing. It was never as bad as I was expecting. But because I was allocating more willpower, I was ready for the challenge and then I succeeded. So I think the key takeaway here for your listeners is if there's any area of your life that you are meeting a lot of resistance, a lot of frustration, it's probably because you expected things to happen more easily, more quickly than they are happening. So just take a moment to reset and tell yourself, you know what? Maybe this is going to be difficult. Maybe this is going to take 3 times longer. And I can fight with reality and reality is going to win. Or I can accept that this is the case and be ready for it. And when you have this reset of mindset, then you will notice that you're able to go through that challenge with less friction.
Yes, this was, like I said, a huge epiphany for me. There was more than one. There were many. The all or nothing thinking was another one. There were a lot of epiphany moments, but it's true that this false hope syndrome, I thought, that's what it is, because I am a very optimistic person by nature and highly enthusiastic. So I think things will be fast and quick and efficient. And when things take longer, then my approach was always just work on your patience. But I feel that helped. Meditation, work on your patience, review your success. But it also helps that even before you start that journey, you think, okay, I will meet probably more obstacles than I'm aware of. And therefore, being prepared to that. I think it's a fine balance between being optimistic and still think you will achieve it and it'll work out, because that's also encouraging, but also foreseeing the obstacles, because that helps you to remain sane.
Yeah. And this is where things get really tricky, Katie, because it's, as you said, like both of these things are true and both of these things are helpful. What I found in my studies, it depends on where you are in the journey. Sometimes what helps you feel more motivated in the beginning will actually kill your motivation at the end. So let me explain this. Before you decide to take on a journey, before you decide to take on a task, it is actually helpful to have the illusion that it's going to be easier than you think it is. Because that, you know what, like, let me do this. The reward is this big and it's not going to be that difficult. So yes, let me do this. So in that phase, like before you actually begin, having a bit of being a bit overly optimistic is helpful for you to have the motivation to go and do it. But the moment that you make the commitment to do that task, to take on that project, to start that business, then you have to shift gears. Then it's like, you know what, maybe this is going to take longer than I expected, and that's okay too. So depending on the phase you are in the journey, one attitude that is helpful here may be not helpful later on. So it's that's why I find that motivation is a fascinating topic. There's like so much nuance to it, but basically you can, I think there's a quote from Mark Twain where he said that if you have optimism and now if you have confidence and delusional optimism, you can achieve anything. I think there's I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like this. So I think that's something that these two things are things that entrepreneurs suffer from or benefit from. It's a two-edged sword here. The confidence and the delusional optimism that, yeah, this is going to be the next Google or the next Facebook, and then we're going to be acquired and we're going to get 1,000 users in the first month and like whatever it is. Because they have the delusion, they get started. So great, that optimism served its purpose. Now that you have started, don't give up because it's not as easy as you expected. Like, readjust your expectations, go through that mindset reset that I've talked about. Know that you may need to continue devoted to that cause, but just know that it's going to take longer and require more effort than you imagine, and be ready for that.
Yeah, exactly. The balance of both. It's a tricky one. And I was very curious about your intake on that. So it's interesting to see that, yes, we do need both, which is what I thought. And at different moments, we use different ones. We're already approaching the last few minutes of the show. What would you recommend to listeners who want to improve their self-discipline and they want to maybe implement one tool or two tools from all your toolkit and your book? Which ones would you recommend?
Okay, it's really tough to give a general advice like this that would be true and helpful for everyone listening to this without knowing where they are. I would recommend that they learn about the 3 pillars of aspiration, awareness, and action. That these are the 3 pillars of self-discipline, and they see which one of them they are the weakest at, and focus there. If you do get the book, in chapter 40 at the end of the book, I kind of provide the map, like, hey, like you've learned like 50 different techniques in the book, but this is actually how you go about it, that you focus on one at a time. You don't need to get overwhelmed about this. So if you have the book, you go to that chapter and read and follow kind of that map. If you don't get the book, then see from this podcast interview what has connected with it, and what are ways that you can create more discipline, more structure in your life. And one obvious way that comes to mind is, building a morning routine. That's like like a monk hour for you, a time in your day before your commitments begin, before the chaos and the messiness of the day begins, that you have an hour. Maybe it's half an hour if that's all you can spare. Maybe it's 2 hours if you're more ambitious, but have a certain period of time where you're dedicating to the most important activities for you. Those habits, those tasks that will really help you move towards your aspirations. And if you do this day in and day out, you're already going to have some self-discipline in your life.
And it's a way of starting the day with a feeling of success. You start with your morning routine and then your most important task at work, and then you already feel that you're starting with that positive spiral. Also, I wanted to mention your workbook on your website is super useful. I also went through it. I couldn't believe how complete it was. It's 50 pages of workbook to accompany the book. So for those of you who love all of this, who enjoy reading the book, highly recommend the workbook for free on your website, and a lot of useful articles too. Thank you so much, Giovanni, for being here today. I have absolutely loved our conversation. I love your work. I have recommended to everyone I meet in Sweden. So if you see the rise of book sales on the west coast of Sweden, you'll know that it's from me. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you.